Picture the moment you realized you were different from everyone around you. Not a little different. Fundamentally, irreversibly different. Now imagine that moment happening not in a school hallway or a family dinner. Imagine it happening 300,000 years ago when being different could get you killed. That is the story no one tells about human evolution. We talk about species and timelines and fossil records, but we almost never ask what it was actually like to be the first one. Your ancestors lived in groups of roughly 20 to 50 people. Every single person in that group looked more or less the same, moved the same, thought the same, because sameness was survival. It meant you belonged. And belonging meant food, protection, warmth, and the chance to pass your genes forward. Then one day, someone was born who wasn't the same. Maybe it was a slightly larger forehead, a slightly longer leg, a mutation that changed the shape of the vocal tract in a way that let that person produce sounds no one else could quite make. Whatever it was visible. And visible difference in a small group triggers something ancient and automatic in human cognition. Psychologist Henry Tajfel, who survived the Holocaust and spent his life studying group identity, showed that humans categorize others as in-group or out-group within milliseconds. Not minutes, milliseconds. And that split-second sorting triggers trust or suspicion faster than any conscious thought can intervene. So what happened to the first person who triggered suspicion? The honest answer is, we don't know their name, we will never know their name. But evolutionary biology and archaeology give us the outline of their life, and it is far stranger and far more moving than the clean diagrams in textbooks suggest. Here is what we do know. Mutation is not rare. Every human born today carries approximately 60 to 70 new genetic mutations that neither of their parents had. Most do nothing. A few do something small. Occasionally, one does something significant. And here is the counterintuitive part. The ones that do something significant are almost always punished first. Because the group does not see a useful trait, the group sees a threat to its own coherence. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer HRDY, in her landmark work on cooperative breeding and early human societies, argues that the survival of any individual in a small prehistoric group depended almost entirely on whether that group chose to invest in them. Infants who seemed too strange were sometimes abandoned. Adults who behaved unpredictably were sometimes driven out, not out of cruelty, out of a survival logic that prioritized group stability above individual variation. And yet here you are, which means the mutations kept spreading, which means at some point the group made a different choice, or the individual found a way to make their difference useful before the group had time to reject it. Paleoanthropologist Ian Tattersall of the American Museum of Natural History has spent decades studying the fossil record of human cognition, and one of his central findings is this: the anatomical capacity for language, for abstract thought, for symbolic behavior, all appeared in the human lineage long before there is any evidence of those abilities actually being used. The hardware arrived first. Then, tens of thousands of years later, came the software. And the only way to explain that gap is if someone somewhere had to figure out how to use something no one around them had ever used before. The first person who used language was speaking into silence. The first person who drew a symbol was making a mark no one had a word for. The first person whose brain lit up in a new way was to everyone around them simply acting strange. And strange is dangerous when your survival depends on predictability. So how did it survive? How did difference persist long enough to become the norm? The answer may lie in what researchers call the social brain hypothesis. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed that the human brain did not grow large to solve math problems or build tools. It grew large to manage the complexity of social relationships. And complexity requires variation. A group where everyone thinks identically becomes brittle. It cannot adapt. One person who sees something differently, who notices the predator the others missed, who suggests the route no one had taken, that person is suddenly not a threat. That person is the reason the group survives the winter. The first human born different was not celebrated, almost certainly not at first, but at some point the difference paid off. And that payment changed everything. Because here is what evolution is actually selecting for, underneath all the traits and mutations and fossil records. It is selecting for the capacity to tolerate difference long enough to discover its value. And every time you find yourself in a room full of people who all think the same way, and you are the one who sees it differently, you are not an outlier. You are not a problem. You are running the oldest survival program in the human lineage, the one that kept the whole species alive. You are not the first person to feel out of place among the people around you. You are simply the latest version of the one who changed everything.